Now, questions are being asked over how the funeral industry is regulated today. Those calls coming after a series of distressing stories about the mistreatment of the bodies of people's loved ones after they died. Matthew Thompson talked to one woman whose grief was compounded by the ill treatment of her mother's body. And a warning, his report contains details of that mishandling.
2 years ago, Dayni lost her mum, Janice. It was sudden, unexpected, traumatic. But what happened next compounded Dayni's trauma. Janice's body had been left in the care of a funeral director. Something went horribly wrong.
You've shown us these photographs of your mum, and they are really, really quite distressing. We're not going to put these on the television. But can you just tell us what is here, in your own words?
Well, she's covered in blood. She's severely bloated to the point of bursting. She looks terrible. She looks all battered and bruised, like she's been killed in a violent attack. When she wasn't, she died in her sleep. She just looks awful. Devastated. I couldn't sleep. I was like thinking all sorts, like thinking like the way the Twitter, like if they'd just been tossing her about like she was nothing, and it was horrible. It's had a massive effect on us. It's ruined my life. I'm sorry.
It's all right, take your time.
Dayni asked another funeral director to step in and help. But as her mum's body deteriorated, it became harder to work out who was responsible.
Funeral directors are entirely unregulated. Standards are in theory upheld by a patchwork of trade bodies who are largely powerless to enforce them. In this case, the first funeral director was investigated and reprimanded, but simply didn't recognise the finding and doesn't accept responsibility. The second funeral director couldn't be investigated as they weren't a member of the trade body, and Dayni was left with nowhere else to turn. We spoke to both funeral directors, who each gave accounts absolving themselves of blame. We also reached out to the trade bodies SAFE and the British Institute of Embalmers.
SAFE said, "We don't believe the industry is marking its own homework. SAFE's standards framework is monitored by the UK Accreditation Service. We've long supported the call for regulation of the funeral sector." The British Institute of Embalmers said, "We would certainly welcome structured regulation within the industry. The industry does really mark its own homework." In 2022, the Fuller inquiry was set up to examine how David Fuller was able to commit sexual offences at mortuaries in Kent. Its chair recently said regulation is urgent. And last year, police began investigating legacy funeral directors in Hull after a report that bodies were not being properly cared for.
So first of all, I should say that the vast majority of funeral directors will give good care. But the lack of regulation does mean that there is no training that they are required to take. There are no particular facilities, the condition that they keep the premises in.
And not even any requirement to have a fridge of any kind.
No, absolutely. There isn't a requirement to have cold storage, refrigerated facilities, which most people will find shocking. It seems completely unbelievable.
In a statement, the Ministry of Justice told us they were reviewing the full range of possible next steps, including looking at options for regulation. No required training, no independent oversight, no inspection. And until that changes, for Dayni and others like her, no answers and no redress. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.